My office was a mess of life, with papers covering every surface and a big map of the district on the wall marked with red pins for every family in the lawsuit. Children's drawings were taped everywhere, bright splashes of color against the government. Beige paint. I remember the smell of old paper and the cheap coffee I drank all day. I believed in the work, and I believed we could win, that the system would protect the people if you just showed it the truth with enough force. The truth was that Councilman Dayo Ojo wanted to bulldoze 3 generations of homes in the historic district for a glass and steel monument to his own greed, what he called the Phoenix Development Zone. Our lawsuit was the only thing standing in his way. Maria, the lead plaintiff, sat across from my desk, twisting a napkin in her hands. She was a single mother with a tired face, but her eyes were still full of fight. We were getting her ready for her deposition, going over the questions Ojo's lawyers would ask. "They'll try to make you feel small," I told her. "They will ask about your job, your rent, how many times you were late on a bill. They want the jury to see a struggling woman, not a homeowner fighting for her community. My grandfather laid the bricks for that house, Julia. My son sleeps in the same room I did." "I know. That's our story. Just stick to it." She trusted me completely, and I felt the weight of that trust. It was my fuel. I spent my days organizing and my nights drafting arguments, running on the belief that our cause was just and our victory was inevitable. I was 29 years old, and I knew I was doing the most important work of my life. The attack came on a Tuesday night. I was at a community meeting in the basement of the old church, the air thick with the smell of coffee and determination. We were planning a voter registration drive, and the energy was high. We felt like we were winning. Then someone tapped my shoulder and held out their phone. The screen was bright in the dim room, showing the headline from the Portico City Chronicle: "Social worker in Ojo lawsuit, accused of child endangerment." My picture was there, a candid shot of me looking tired and stressed. Below it was a picture of a child's bedroom, a chaotic mess of clothes and toys on the floor. I knew that room. It was Maria's son's room, on a day I had visited when he was sick, and the whole house was turned upside down. The article painted a story of neglect I had supposedly ignored, citing an anonymous report and a forged entry in a logbook claiming I missed a crucial welfare check. It said I was exploiting a vulnerable family for my own political agenda. The words blurred as the blood drained from my face. My phone started ringing. It was my boss from the Department of Family Services. His voice was cold and distant. He said I was suspended pending an investigation. He said I was not to contact any of my cases. The line went dead. The community meeting had stopped, and everyone was looking at me, their faces a mix of confusion and suspicion. The trust that had filled the room just moments before was gone, replaced by a terrible silence. The next 48 hours were a planned demolition. Ojo's network of blogs picked up the story and amplified it, twisting my years of service into a narrative of ambition and cruelty. My friends stopped calling. My colleagues sent my calls to voicemail. I was locked out of my work email, cut off from the files and the families that were my entire life. I tried to reach Maria, but her phone was disconnected. I went to her house, the one her grandfather had built, but the curtains were drawn and no one answered the door. I was completely alone, watching the life I had built burn down on 100 different screens. A week later, a man from Ojo's office, his chief of staff I think, found me. He was wearing a plain business suit and had a quiet, efficient way about him. He told me Maria had withdrawn from the lawsuit. He said the councilman had arranged a new apartment for her in one of the new city housing units and a job cleaning offices downtown. She had taken the deal. The lawsuit, our one big hope, collapsed without its lead plaintiff. The next day, I received a certified letter. I was fired. The final blow came weeks after that. I was packing my life into cardboard boxes when a former coworker called from a blocked number. She sounded scared. She told me the city council had rerouted funding from the family services budget to a slush fund for the Phoenix project. The maintenance staff for the new city housing units had been cut. She said Maria's son had fallen. A loose railing on a stairwell that had been reported weeks ago had given way. He had broken his arm badly. The child I was accused of neglecting had been hurt because of the very system that was supposed to protect him, a system Ojo had deliberately starved. That was the moment my belief in the system died. It was not a tool for justice, it was a weapon, and Ojo knew how to wield it better than anyone. I looked around my empty apartment, at the boxes filled with a life that no longer existed. I saw that my hope had been a weakness. My compassion had been a vulnerability he could exploit. I left most of the boxes there. I took the money from my savings account, all of it in cash. I wiped my laptop, destroyed my phone, and walked away from Portico City without looking back. I decided that if the only power that mattered was the kind that operated in the shadows, then I would learn to live in the dark. "5 years felt like a lifetime ago, and it also felt like yesterday. I lived in a different city now, in a tall building made of glass and steel that looked over a grid of lights. The apartment had 3 rooms and almost nothing in them. A bed with a gray blanket, a single chair at a long desk, and a kitchen counter that was always clean. I did not cook. My life was inside the 6 monitors that covered the wall above the desk. They were my windows and my weapons. I spent my days tracking the flow of money and information, finding weaknesses in powerful people for clients who paid me in cryptocurrency. I was a ghost who haunted the digital world. My name was Jules now, a name with no history attached to it. The encrypted call came from a broker I trusted. He told me a candidate in Portico City needed my services. The name he gave was Dayo Ojo. For a moment, I could not breathe. The air in my sterile apartment became thick, heavy with the past. The broker said the pay was significant. I did not care about the money. I had spent 1,825 days preparing for this. I told him to set up the meeting. Dr. Imani Pryor looked tired. We met on a video call with our cameras off and our voices disguised, but I could hear the weariness in her words. She was an academic, a believer in good ideas and honest debate. Her campaign was failing because Dayo Ojo did not fight with ideas. He fought with favors and threats. Her campaign manager explained their situation, the lack of funding, the media blackout. Then Dr. Pryor spoke directly to me. "I have been told you're the best. I have also been told that your methods are aggressive. I want to win, but there are certain lines I will not cross. I have to ask, to beat a man like him, what are you willing to do?" I thought about the question. I thought about my old life, the smell of my mother's sauce, the feel of a child's hand in mine. I thought about the fake photographs and the headlines that called me a monster. "I will do whatever it takes to make sure he loses," I said. "That is what you are paying for." There was a long silence. Then she agreed to my terms. The contract was signed with a digital key and the first payment appeared in my account. My war had begun. My first objective was to understand Ojo's strength. His power was not just in backroom deals. He had built a public image as a man of the people, a savior of the community. His son was a major part of that image. Tunda Ojo ran a non-profit that built community gardens and workshops in poor neighborhoods. He was everything his father pretended to be. I needed to see him for myself. The workshop was in an old warehouse in the South Side, the same neighborhood I used to work in. The air smelled like sawdust and coffee. People were everywhere, sawing wood, sketching plans on chalkboards, carrying bags of soil. Tunde was in the middle of it all, his sleeves rolled up, showing a young woman how to use a power drill. He was handsome, with a kind face that made people trust him. I watched him for an hour. He broke up a dispute between 2 volunteers with a calm word. He helped an old man carry a box to his car. He listened to everyone who spoke to him, really listened. It hurt to watch him because he reminded me of a person I had killed a long time ago. Me. I approached him with a story about wanting to volunteer. It was a tactical decision. He was a potential source of information, a weakness in the Ojo family armor. He smiled, and his smile was genuine. He showed me around the workshop, explaining their projects with a passion that was not an act. We talked for a long time. I found myself telling him small, true things about myself, carefully edited, but true nonetheless. It was a mistake. My first real attack on his father was surgical. I traced the ownership of a dozen slum properties back to a shell corporation. That corporation received funding from one of Dayo Ojo's largest campaign donors. I compiled the data, a clean line connecting Ojo's money to human misery. I sent the package to Dr. Pryor. She was hesitant. She wanted to talk about policy, to use the information in a debate. "That's not how you win," I told her. "You don't debate a shark, you bleed him." She did not like it. She wanted a clean fight. I knew there was no such thing. I went around her. I had already identified a junior aide on a different councilman's staff who had a gambling problem. A little blackmail, a quiet threat, and he gave me the final piece of evidence I needed, an internal zoning memo. I leaked the entire story to an independent journalist I had on my payroll. The story exploded. Ojo's donor was disgraced, and Ojo himself had to spend a week answering ugly questions. It was a victory. Dr. Pryor was furious with me for acting on my own, for using blackmail. A rift opened between us. But the real consequence came a few days later. I met Tunde for coffee. He looked exhausted. He told me the city was launching a surprise review of all nonprofit permits in the wake of the scandal. His newest community center, the one in the final stages of construction, had its funding frozen. He was worried he would have to lay off staff, that the project would die. He asked me for advice. He looked at me with such trust, and I sat there, the architect of his problem, offering him useless words of comfort. The revenge I wanted felt specific. It was not enough to destroy Ojo's career. I needed to clear my name. I started digging into the events of 5 years ago. I found the name of the private investigator Ojo's team had used to create the fake evidence against me. He was a bottom feeder, a man with a long history of dirty work. I tried to access his financial records, but they were sealed, locked behind layers of legal protection. I had hit a wall. There was one person I could call, a black hat hacker I knew from a previous life. I had promised myself I would never contact him again. His methods were too dangerous, too illegal. But I looked at the file on my screen, the one with my own face in it, next to the words chilled endangerment. I transferred a large sum of Dr. Pryor's campaign money to an untraceable account and sent him a one-word message, access. 2 days later, a file appeared on my secure server. It was the investigator's complete banking history for the year I was fired. There it was, a single transfer of $100,000. It came from a discretionary fund controlled by Dayo Ojo's chief of staff. The date was 1 week after my social work license was revoked. I had it, the smoking gun. I stared at the screen, a feeling of cold triumph washing over me. This was proof. This was my exoneration. That evening, Tunde came to my apartment for the first time. He looked at the empty rooms, the wall of monitors. I think he saw the loneliness, not the efficiency. He did not ask about my work. He just looked at me. "I need to tell you something," he said. "I think I am falling in love with you." The words hung in the sterile air between us. He was good and kind, and he was the son of the man I was going to destroy. My proof was on the screen behind me. My victory was in my hand, and it felt like ashes in my mouth. I had everything I needed to get my life back, but it meant I had to shatter his. I spent the next hour sitting in the dark after he left. My systems were running, as always, scraping the web for any mention of Ojo or Pryor. An alert popped up on my main screen. It was a keyword flag I had set 5 years ago, for a name I had not used since, Julia Capozzi. I clicked the link. It was an article from the Portico City Chronicle, just published. The headline was a punch to the gut. PRYR. Campaigns SECIR. PR. Weepin is disgraced former social worker. Below it was my old headshot, the one for my Department of Family Services ID badge. He had found me. Ojo knew who I was. My phone began to ring. Its vibration, a harsh buzz against the cold surface of my desk. The caller ID was Dr. Pryor's secure number. I let it ring 3 times before I answered, my own voice, a stranger in my ears. I saw the news. I know, I said. There was a pause filled with the static of a difficult decision. I have to denounce you. I have to fire you. Publicly. It's the only way the campaign survives. You do what you have to do, I told her, and I ended the call before she could say anything else. The screens in front of me were a gallery of my own failure. News sites, social media feeds, television broadcasts, all of them showing my face, all of them repeating the old lies. The ghost was gone, and Julia Capozzi, the monster, was back. My strategy of becoming a better liar had led me right back to the same prison. Ojo had not just beaten me, he had used my own methods to do it. A hard knock sounded on my apartment door. I knew it was Tunde. I opened it and he stood there, his face a mask of pain and disbelief. He held up his phone, showing me the headline with my picture. Is it true? I could not lie to him, not now. I could only nod. Everything? He asked, his voice cracking. Were you using me the whole time to get to him? At first, I said, it started that way. He shook his head slowly, a deep and final sadness in his eyes. He looked around my empty apartment at the monitors that told the real story of who I was. You're just like him, he said, his voice barely a whisper. You use people. He turned and walked away, and I closed the door, alone in my silent command center, the city lights below seeming very far away. For 2 days, I did not leave the apartment. I watched my own character assassination play out in a 24-hour news cycle. Dr. Pryor made a statement expressing her shock and disappointment, officially severing all ties with her anonymous strategist, now revealed to be a disgraced and dangerous woman. Dayo Ojo gave a press conference, looking grave and concerned, speaking of the sanctity of our city's government and the dark forces trying to tear it down. He was winning. He had already won. I had burned away everything good in myself to fight him, and all I had managed to do was burn down my own life for a second time. On the 3rd night, there was another knock on the door. It was Tunde again. He looked different, his sadness replaced by a cold resolve. He was clean-shaven and his eyes were clear. He walked past me into the apartment without an invitation. I found his old chief of staff, he said, his voice flat. The one he fired right after you were. He runs a bar on the west side now. Tunde told me everything. He described the dark little room with the sticky floors, the bitter man behind the counter who refused to speak about Ojo. He said he left that night, but something I had taught him had taken root. You do not ask for what you want, you find the leverage to take it. He spent the next day digging, using public records and old news articles to piece together the man's story. He found an old embezzlement charge that was dropped, a quiet scandal that disappeared just before the chief of staff was forced to resign. Ojo had not just fired him, he had set him up to take a fall. I went back to the bar, Tunde said, looking at me directly. I told him I had the evidence to prove Ojo framed him for stealing city funds, and I offered him a trade, his story for my evidence. Tunde reached into his jacket and pulled out a file folder. He walked to my desk and placed a single piece of paper on the clean surface, next to my keyboard. It was a sworn affidavit, signed and notarized. I read the first sentence. It was a full confession from the former chief of staff, detailing how Dayo Ojo had personally instructed him to hire a private investigator and manufacture the evidence that destroyed my career. This isn't for revenge, Tunde said, his voice firm. This is for the city. Help me finish this the right way. My own anger felt small and useless next to his clarity. He had turned his pain into purpose. He was not asking me to be a weapon anymore. He was asking me to be a strategist for something other than destruction. We stood there for a long time, the affidavit on the desk between us, a bridge from my past to a new future. I picked it up. A media leak is too simple, I said, my mind already working. It gives him a chance to spin it, to call it a lie. We don't just expose him. We make him expose himself. The plan came together quickly, built not on lies but on a foundation of truth. It had 3 stages. First, we would cripple his operation. Second, we would build a stage. Third, we would give him the opportunity to perform his own execution. I turned to my monitors, my fingers moving across the keyboard. I pulled up a file I had been holding on to, evidence of federal wire fraud connected to the Phoenix Project. Dr. Pryor had told me it was too much, a line she would not cross. I no longer had to ask for her permission. I encrypted the file and sent it to a contact I had in the U.S. Attorney's Office. 2 days later, the news broke that a federal investigation had been opened into Ojo's campaign financing. A judge issued an order freezing all his assets pending the investigation. His television ads stopped running. His fundraising events were canceled. He was wounded, cut off from the dark money that was his lifeblood. While he was reeling, Tunde made his move. He used his name and his reputation to organize a last-minute public forum on the future of the city's waterfront development. He invited every member of the city council. The media coverage was immediate and widespread. In his weakened state, Ojo could not afford to look like he was hiding. He had no choice but to accept the invitation. I watched the forum from my apartment, a live feed taking up all 6 of my monitors. The auditorium was packed. I had a secure audio link to an earpiece Dr. Pryor was wearing. She was on the stage, seated next to Dayo Ojo. Tunde was in the front row of the audience. I was the ghost in the machine, seeing everything, ready to pull the strings. Dr. Pryor began, following my script. She asked a series of calm, pointed questions about campaign finance, about zoning variances, about the Phoenix Project. Ojo answered with his usual smooth confidence, but a thin layer of sweat was visible on his forehead under the bright stage lights. He was trapped, and he was getting angry. Then came the moment we had planned. Tunde walked to the public microphone in the center aisle. The cameras all turned to him. He looked directly at the stage, at his father. "Councilman," Tunde's voice was steady, carrying through the large room. "Your former chief of staff has provided a sworn statement detailing your role in the framing of Julia Capozzi 5 years ago." He did not raise his voice. He did not hold up the paper. He just stated the fact and let it settle in the silent auditorium. Ojo stared at his son. I watched his face on my center screen, magnified and clear. I saw the flicker of panic, the instant calculation, and then the shift into pure rage. His mask of the benevolent public servant did not just crack, it shattered. He stood up, knocking his chair back. "You," he spat into the microphone, his voice a venomous snarl. "You are weak. You have always been weak. I gave you everything, a name, a fortune, and you throw it away for that woman, for a pathetic need to be liked." He was not speaking to the audience anymore. He was speaking only to his son, his face twisted into an ugly sneer. "You are nothing, a traitor." A wave of murmurs and gasps went through the crowd. The cameras did not move. They captured every moment of his horrifying, raw cruelty. He had been given a choice, and he had chosen to show everyone the monster he truly was. His political life ended right there, not with a document or a news story, but with his own hateful words echoing in a silent room. Months later, I stood on a different stage. Councilwoman Imani Pryor was at a podium, announcing the city's official termination of the Phoenix Development Project. She spoke of a new plan, one that would be led by community boards and focused on serving the people who already lived in the city. I stood a few feet behind her, in the spot reserved for her chief of staff. My name was cleared, my license was restored, but I was not the same person I had been. Tunde was in the audience. He met my eyes, and we shared a look that was not about romance, but about a shared and heavy victory. I knew the cost of what we had done. I turned my gaze from him and looked past the crowd, through the large windows, to the city skyline. I had beaten the man who tried to erase me. I had done it by mastering the system that created him. I was not a social worker anymore, and I was not a ghost. I was something else now, a guardian watching from inside the walls.